Hello everybody, this is David, and in this video we're going to go through the basics of installing a CasaTunes system. So let's go ahead and start with our physical connections. So as you can see from this diagram here, we have a CasaTunes CT+2 music server, which is a 2-stream music server. And we have a CasaTunes CT 6x6 matrix amplifier, which is a 6-zone, 6-source matrix amplifier. So the first thing we need to do is we need to connect the sources from the music server to the matrix amplifier. And so we're going to take the first two sources on the music server, so that's S1 and S2, and we're going to connect them to input sources 1 and 2 respectively. And that is shown here in this, the bubble item number 1 over here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and connect the USB to serial cable, because the matrix amplifier, the 6x6 matrix amplifier, uses serial for control. And so we're going to plug one end into the USB port on the music server, and we'll connect the other end into the RS-232 connection. The next thing we're going to do is, actually as a last thing, we're going to plug in the power. So for now, we won't do that. But the next step would be to hook up the 6x6 keypad hub. If you're using any keypads, those keypads will connect to this keypad hub, and then the keypad hub connects to the keypad port on your 6x6. But I'm not going to cover that in this tutorial. The next step is to hook up our speakers. Now in this example, we have 5 rooms that are directly connected and powered by the 6x6. So zones 1 through 5 are being used to power the kitchen, office, guest room, master bedroom, and the master bathroom. And then the 6th zone is being used to power the living room, but we're actually going to power the living room using an AV receiver. It shows Pioneer here, but we're actually going to use a Denon. And the way this works in CasaTunes is you take the preamp output for a zone, like in this case zone 6, and we feed it into an available available input on the AV receiver. And so in this case, we're actually going to connect from zone 6 preamp out to the auxiliary 1 on this Denon AV receiver. And then once we've done that, there is one other thing that we should do, and that is check some of the switches on the back of the 6x6. So obviously the first thing we need to do is make sure that the voltage selector is set to the right position. And if you don't do this, you could damage the amplifier. So just make sure that the voltage selector is set to the appropriate setting for your location. You'll also notice that there is a master slave 1 and slave 2 switch on the back of the in the back of the 6x6. And this is used in the case that you have more than one amp. This is used to determine which amp this is. So the amp that is connected to the first 6 zones, zones 1 through 6, should be set to master. The amp that's connected to the second set of zones, i.e. zone 7 through zone 12, should be set to slave 1. And the switch should be set to slave 2 for zones 13 through 18. So you can connect these 3 amps in line like this. And then don't forget that if you are connecting multiple amps, to also use the ribbon cable that's provided, as that provides the control signals between the 2 amps. There is another switch on the back of the 6x6 called the automatic gain control. It's labeled AGC. We recommend that you set this to yes. And what this will do is it will attempt to balance the volume levels on the input sources. And then as a cautionary tale, do not plug in the network into the keypads port on the back of the 6x6, as this could damage it. This keypads port is designed exclusively to be used to connect to the multi-zone controller keypad hub. So it's the way the keypads hook up is you take your keypads in each room and you wire them to the keypad hub, and then then you connect the keypad hub to this keypads port. And for more information on the matrix amplifier and how to configure the keypads, you can download the manual from the support resources section on our website. Okay, so now that we have done our physical connections and we've made sure our switches are all in the correct locations, we can now power up all our equipment. And the next thing for us to do is to configure the CasaTunes system using the CasaTunesX app. So we can run CasaTunesX in a browser, or it can be run on an Android device or an Apple device or even an Amazon tablet. It doesn't really matter which device you use, but for this tutorial in this video, we're just going to use the browser-based app. The functionality is identical across all these different platforms. Okay, so let's go ahead and load up our CasaTunesX app. So we typically start out in the rooms view, and this gives you a listing of all the rooms. Now, we haven't configured the matrix type yet, so by default, because this is a CT+2, it is automatically configured as a 2-zone system. So let's go ahead now and configure it as a CT 6x6. In order to do that, what we need to do is we need to go to the menu option here in our app header and go ahead and select Settings. And then from the Settings, select System Setup. And here you can see that we can configure the matrix settings, including the matrix amplifier, sources, and rooms. And these will be the ones that we're primarily focused on. But first, there is this setting called Music Server Mode, and it's currently set in System Mode. This is what we want. The other option is to be Streamer Mode. So if you're using your CasaTunes music server purely as a streamer and you're not controlling a matrix amplifier, you should connect it in streamer mode. Otherwise, you should connect it in system mode. Since we are controlling the CT 6x6, we'll be putting it in system mode. The next thing is to select our matrix amplifier. As you can see here, it's currently selected for a CasaTunes CT, but we want it to be a CT 6x6. So let's go ahead and change the matrix amplifier. Here's a listing of all the different matrix amplifiers that we support. I believe there's 60 plus. And in this case, we just want to go ahead and select the CasaTunes CT 6x6. So let's go ahead and select that. So once we select this, you'll now see that there are some additional properties to be set. The first is the number of units, so the number of amps that we're using. In this case, we're just using 1, but if we had 12 zones or 18 zones, we would change the number of units. And we also need to specify which serial port is being used to control the 6x6. And in this case, we've only got 1 serial port. If we had more serial ports, there would be an option to select them. But we only have 1 serial port, and it's COM3, so just assume that it knows what it's doing and it's selected the right one. Okay, at this point, we have configured the music server to be in system mode, and we've selected the correct amplifier. Now what we need to do is configure our sources. So let's go ahead into the sources. And here you see that there are the 6 sources available on the 6x6. 2 of them have been set up as CasaTunes media players, which is basically the streams that are coming out of our music server. And all we really need to do for this basic installation is we may want to change the names of these players. What we do is we recommend that you set the player to the name of somebody in the household. And the idea is that each person in the household can have their own player, and that way when they play music they can select their player and not affect other people not affect the music that's playing on other people's players. So if we go into player 1, now let's assume that the 2 people that are using this system in this house is Jack and Jill. So we're going to name player 1 Jack's player. Let's go ahead and just type that in. And Jack's player is connected to, this is this is input source 1. So if we look at input source 1, we also see that it's connected to S1 on our music server. So that's the physical connection we made before. We connected the cable from the output on the music server S1 and connected it to the input source 1 on the 6x6. So this guy is now set up, and let's go ahead and select Jill's player. So we're going to select player 2. We're going to change that to Jill's player. And you'll notice that Jill's player, this is now as input source 2 on our 6x6, is connected to S2 on our music server. So let's go ahead and save that. Now, one thing that you'll notice, especially when you're initially setting up a system, you're going to be prompted all the time to save your changes. What we recommend when you're first setting up your system is to go ahead into the settings and go into the app settings, scroll down to where it says prompt to save system settings, and disable that for now. This way, when you make changes to the system, you're not going to get prompted all the time, and that'll speed things up a little bit. So the other thing that we want to do in the sources here is we don't have any sources connected to sources 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the 6x6. So let's go ahead and hide these from the UI. So in order to do that, let's go ahead into the source, and now let's disable displaying the source. So this will prevent this source from being displayed in the UI. And let's go back. And you notice that when we went back, we weren't prompted to save the changes. You'll also notice that this source is now grayed out. And so that's a visual indicator whether this source is enabled or not. And so we want to disable the rest of them as well. So let's go ahead and disable 4. Let's go ahead and disable 5. And let's go ahead and disable 6. Okay, so all we have now in our system is we have the 2 players, Jack's player and Jill's player, set up, and that's it. The rest of these sources could be used at another time to add additional sources. For example, you could add a vinyl player, or you could add a Bluetooth receiver, which we're coming out with, or you could, anything. You can add an echo device or any kind of device, any kind of music device. You can set this up as another source. So once we've set up the sources, let's go ahead now and set up our rooms. And just as a reminder, our rooms are set up. Zone 1 is the kitchen, Zone 2 is the office, Zone 3 is the guest room, Zone 4 is the master bedroom, Zone 5 is the master bathroom, and then Zone 6 is where we have a Denon AV receiver in the living room. So let's see how we configure those in the CasaTunesX. So we're going to go into our rooms, and we're going to configure Zone 1 is going to be the kitchen. And all I need to do here is just go ahead and change the names. So let me go ahead, and there are a bunch of there's a list with a bunch of names for different rooms in the house. So we can just go ahead and select the kitchen as one of the names. If the name was, let's say it's kitchen and bar, it could be a custom name, in which case we could just go into the custom and enter enter in our own name. But in this case, it's just kitchen, so that's just fine. Okay, so Zone 2 is going to be our guest bedroom. Let's go ahead and select that. Zone 3 is going to be, Zone 2 is the dining room. Zone 3 is our guest bedroom. Zone 4 is our master bedroom. Zone 5 is our master bathroom. and then zone 6 is going to be our living room. Now, zone 6 is a little bit different because if you recall, this is the one that we are connecting to an AV receiver. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. As we get to that, I also want to show you some of the other properties that you can set for rooms. So you can set the room name, you can set a room picture, so you can, it's more useful on a mobile device where you have a camera. You can take pictures of the room and set that picture for a room. Just like we could display a source, we can turn off displaying a room, in which case it won't be displayed in the UI. There is an all on command, and if you don't want this room to turn on as part of that all on command, you can exclude it. Then we have a bunch of volume settings, so you can set the maximum volume for a room. You can set the volume when a room is first turned on. You can set the maximum turn on volume. So this is a little bit different, but I think it's more useful. You could, for example, set the maximum turn on volume to be 50. Now, if the room was at 30 when you turned the room on, it would not affect that volume. But if the room was at 70 and then you turn that room on, it would trim the volume back down to 50. You can set, if you want a fixed volume, you can set the fixed volume here. And in fact, for the AVR, as we'll see in a second, this will end up getting switched on when we enable the AVR. So we have things like night mode settings, we have equalization settings, and we have many other settings. But what we want to do now is we want to configure the AV receiver for this room. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and enable the AV receiver. The next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and connect. We need to go ahead and specify what type of AV receiver we're going to use. Now in my case here, I'm going to go ahead and use a Denon using IP control, and we are going to use the main zone on that Denon. Now we support AV receivers with multiple zones, so you could theoretically set up the different zones in different bedrooms, in different rooms. But in this case, we're going to use the main receiver in the main room in the living room. Now that we select that model, it's going to prompt us for additional information. So first of all, it's letting us know that this driver is using IP control, so it's using the Ethernet protocol. It's asking me for the IP address. Now, because I've done this before, it has the correct IP address, but here you would enter the IP address of your AV receiver. Now, CasaTunes cannot auto-discover these IP addresses, so it's smart to set up your AV receiver with a static IP address so that this will not move on you. Typically, you do not have to set the port number. This is automatically set by CasaTunes. And then you have to select which input source on the AV receiver is being used for the CasaTunes music. So if you recall in the setup, we connected the output, the preamp output of zone 6. We connected it to the auxiliary input on this AV receiver. And so we have to select the source on the AV receiver that we want to use. In this case, it's also being selected because I set this up previously. But you would just go ahead and select one of the available sources on that Denon. So the way this actually works is when you power on the living room, CasaTunes is going to power on the AV receiver if it's not already powered on. It is then going to switch the input source on that AV receiver to auxiliary 1. And then it's going to, when you change the volume, it's going to actually issue commands to the AV receiver to change the volume on the AV receiver. The CasaTunes is going to, the preamp output coming from the 6x6 is going to be configured with a fixed volume, and it's going to be configured with 90, which is what we recommend. So coming out of the 6x6, there's a fixed volume, And when we want to change the volume on the AV receiver, we're actually going to send commands to the AV receiver to change the volume on the AV receiver. So you're going to see the volume be changed on the AV receiver as you change the volume in CasaTunes. Okay, and that is how we set up our rooms. So at this point we have set up our matrix, our sources, and our rooms. There are a lot of other settings that you can have, things like room groups and page, and a lot more settings over here. But the purpose of this video is just to get you up and going quickly with a basic system. So I'm not going to go into that, but we will have other videos that will go through all of that. Okay, so now that I've got my room set up, probably the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to want to set up the music for the customer. So let's go into any of these rooms. We can go into the master bedroom as an example. And you can see here that if we go to pick music, this is going to be the default music that's installed on the CasaTunes music server. This first item up here, Disk Music, this is actually 3 songs that we put on your music server, and it's typically used for testing the system. But once you deliver this to the customer, you're going to want to get rid of this music collection. At least, most likely, you want to get rid of the music collection. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, Disk Music is actually set up in settings. So what we need to do is go back to the room and scroll down to settings, and you'll see there's this My Music in our other settings options. And you'll see that we have one music collection defined, and it's called Music, and that's the one that we saw. So to remove that item from our music selection, we're just going to go ahead and delete it. You can always add this back later if you wanted to. Okay, so let's go back to the music selection now, and now you can see that we've removed the Disk Music. So now we've got Shoutcast and TuneIn, and what I'd like to do is add some music services. I'd like to add some Spotify music, and I also want to delete this Shoutcast music service. So the way to do this is you'll see that there's this Add or Edit button here, and that is used to get us in the mode of adding or editing our music services. So let's select that, and you'll see that these additional more menu buttons were added to each of the music services, and one of these allows me to go ahead and delete that music services. So I'm going to delete the Shoutcast service. Now you'll also see this plus at the bottom here, and this allows me to add music services. So I'm going to add 2 Spotify accounts. I'm going to add one for Jack and one for Jill. So that way Jack can play his own music on his own player and not affect Jill from listening to her own music on her own player. And because they're 2 different accounts, they can each have different playlists and favorites and so forth. So let me go ahead and select Add Music Service. And let me go ahead and select Spotify Music. Okay, and so it's now added this music service account, but what I really want to do is, because I'm going to have 2 different Spotify music accounts, I want to name one of them Jack Spotify and the other one Jill. So let me go ahead and rename this. I'm going to rename this to be Jack Spotify. Now I haven't configured the account information for Jack Spotify. The way to do that is actually navigate into Jack Spotify, and it will prompt me to log in. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and this is going to take me to an authentication screen from Spotify. And what Spotify is doing here is it's asking if it's okay for CasaTunes to be able to view this account data activity on Spotify and take these actions. And this is all the stuff that we need in order for our Spotify support to work in CasaTunes. The second thing to notice is which account you're logged in as. So I'm currently logged in as Crinker Guest, which is not the account that I want to use for Jack. So I'm going to say not you, and now I'm going to enter in the Spotify account that I want to use for Jack. And this account name doesn't have to match what we've called the player. So let's go ahead and log in. And now if I scroll down, it says logged in as CasaTunes, and that is the Spotify account I want to use for Jack, so I'm going to go ahead and agree to that. If it all works well, we'll get this smiley face that says, hey, everything's great. Now I can close that tab, and now when I drill down into Jack's Spotify music, I can go ahead and select my Spotify music. So we've done Jack's Spotify account. Let's go ahead now and add Jill's Spotify. Again, we're going to add a music service, and we're going to scroll down and add Spotify browser. And now we're going to rename this. We're going to rename this one, and we're going to rename this to Jill's Spotify. And again, we have to set up Jill's account. So let's navigate into Jill's Spotify. Yes, log in. And again, we're going to be on the wrong account because this was Jack's account. So now we've got to change it over to Jill's account. So this one is going to be guest. Crinker. Okay, and if we go down here, it's Crinker Guest. That's the account I want to use. We get the happy smiley face. Everything's good. And now we can go down into Jill's Spotify, and everything is set up okay. Okay, and we can then get out of our Edit Music Services mode. And it's not really that important to get out of that. Eventually you will get out of it automatically, so you don't need to worry about it. But at this point, when we come to select our music, we can select music from Jack's Spotify or Jill's Spotify, and we can select internet radio from TuneIn. So that pretty much sets everything up. So anyway, that is the basic installation of a CasaTunes system. And I hope you have enjoyed this video, and thank you for your time.